State your name.
Hello, I'm Bruce Oliver. I attend here at Grace Fellowship in Amador County, and I've had a number of significant experiences in my life, many times, where I have almost died, and I only came to realize later, after I came to know the Lord, that the Lord had stepped in and graciously saved my life, literally and physically saved my life. But the one that stands out the most for me is actually fairly recent after I accepted the Lord.
What year was this?
2003, I had accepted the Lord, and I had got married in December of 2003, and my new wife and I were going to take a car to her daughter in Iowa because her daughter decided to live with her father. And so I had got a used car. I fixed it up so it was nice. I had a 20-foot car hauler trailer, so I loaded it up in that. We were going to surprise her by driving out and towing this. So I had a big truck, and I bought a used camper to put on the back so we could make it a little bit of an adventure. We decided to leave after work on a Friday, and I did the driving until about 2:15 in the morning. We were just outside of Las Vegas, and a little ways out actually, and I decided I'm too tired to drive anymore. And so my wife, Carol, was going to drive. She'd never driven anything like this, a big truck, a rig, towing, but she's a really good driver. So I asked her if she was up for it. She said yes. So she took over driving, and I stayed up, sitting up, watching her, watching the speed, making sure everything was good for about 15 minutes till about 2:30. Then I thought, okay, she's doing really well. And I said, just keep it between 55 and 60, because even with the extra stuff I put on the truck to keep it from swaying with that camper and towing, it was doing a little swaying if you started to go anything over about 60. So she was doing that. I thought, good, I'm going to put my head back and get some sleep. I didn't know how much time it was, but all of a sudden, I'm in my reclined seat, and I open my eyes, and I can tell something's not right. I don't know if it was the sound of the wind, the tires, the feel of the motion. I don't know what it was, but something woke me up. And I looked over at my wife, and then I looked at the dash, and to my horror, she was doing 95 miles an hour. The problem is she didn't know she was doing 95 miles an hour. In a big truck, you don't always feel the speed. She later informed me that there had been a slow van going like 50, and we're on Interstate 15, so she simply moved to the fast lane and stepped on the gas to go around, not realizing that the big diesel engine was going to launch us to as fast as we ended up in as short a time. So I said, oh my God, Carol, you're doing 95 miles an hour. And she looked down. I said, just slowly take your foot off the gas. So she did. She was really good. But I didn't think about the fact that where you're towing a tongue dragger hooked to a hitch at the back of the truck, and so the diesel engine has a lot of compression, the truck starts to slow down pretty fast with that. Well, that trailer with a car inside started pushing us, because we were on a slight downhill, which is why the truck accelerated so fast. It was a very slight grade, but she didn't realize it. So she took it off. The next thing I know, the truck starts to do one of these, and it finally made a last one, and I could tell. I said, oh my gosh, this is it. And the truck began to tip up. And we're probably at about this angle. And I looked down at my wife and I said, we're going over. And in that moment, the entire inside of the cab lit up with a white light. I was cognizant. I was just thinking, this is really strange. What the heck? And I'm looking, and I looked at her again. I said, we're going over. And so the truck slams down on the road. Sparks, dust, crashing, wreck, noise, tearing of metal, all kinds of just heinous, scary noises. And it just seemed to go on forever, but it finally came to a stop on the side. And in front of the windshield now is swirling just dust. You can't see anything, but I see two lights out there, and I think, oh, that's a car, we're going to get hit. And about that long, and I just paused, I hear, we can get up over here. And I'm thinking to myself, what? And in that amount of time, my door opens. So I'm thinking, we can get up over here. What are they talking about? And how in the world did they get up on my truck that fast? I'm thinking this. My wife is still white knuckle on the steering wheel down there, frozen, glued to the steering wheel. And I hear, give me your hand. And I look up, and here's these two young guys standing, on the outside. And so I undo my seatbelt, and in the process, I strained my left arm just a little. And I reached up, and they just kind of lifted me right up and out. And then one of the guys got down in front of the wreck. And I haven't even had time to really survey other than to look, and I see the trailer on its wheels over here with the car upside down coming out the front of it. And the camper's still attached, but it's just stuff strewn all over.
Your car is upside down.
No,
okay.
The car we were delivering. Is in the trailer.
Oh, right.
The trailer, it turns out, had rolled 3 times, but the car inside evidently didn't keep up with it, and it came out the front, and it was upside down now, while the trailer was right side up. So I'm looking at the nose of the car. The trailer's kind of off to my right, and so this is just seconds. I went, and I got it. The other guy got down. I started calling for my wife, Carol, to give me her hand. And she was still in shock. She was hanging on. And, I looked at the guy, and then I looked back down. I said, Carol. And I kind of got down on my knees. He's holding the door open, standing on the fender of the car. I said, give me your hand. She finally looks up at me, and I said, we're okay. Give me your hand. So she undoes her seatbelt, and she slowly, you can tell she's shook. She gets up. She begins to stand up on the low side of the car, and I reach down, I grab her hand, and then she kind of climbs up over the console and hanging onto the dash, and we get her up and out, and then the door closes. So I'm standing now on the window of the passenger side door. My wife's standing on the side of the door, and this guy's still standing on the fender. So my wife sits down with her legs off the side hanging by the windshield to slide down, when all of a sudden I hear this horrendous squealing. Well, to set the scene, right here's the camper, here's the bottom of the truck over this way, and right there is a semi 18-wheeler slowly rolling past, well over on the dirt median on the slow side of the traffic. And there was about a football field of cars that had backed up behind that truck. Well, the squealing, as it turns out, was somebody who had been in the fast lane scooting along and had either was not watching, was asleep, or something. And so they slammed on the brakes. Now, this was an older car. It to me, like an old Ford Fairlane is what always stuck in my head from this, because there were no anti-lock brakes going. All 4 tires were smoking. It's coming straight at us. In my mind, it's like, we survived the accident, now we're going to die. This thing's going to hit all 4 of us, flip up, just take us right off the top of the whole thing, we're done. I no more than had that thought. I mean, you got to understand, this is all seconds that this is taking place, when that car suddenly did an exact right-hand turn. Now, I'm thinking in my mind, I took physics in school. I understand motion and dynamics and friction and all this stuff. And that car turning sideways shouldn't have done anything. Should have just kept skidding towards us at the speed it was going. But it turned like this and no longer was moving towards us, but was now going straight at the cars on the side of the road. But before it hit them, it did another exact right-hand turn. And I'm watching this, and the tires are smoking. I'm watching them smoke. The wheels are not turning. And I think my jaw must have been hanging down because I was like, that's not possible, is my thought. And it skid miraculously right between the semi and the very top of the camper. It only had to have inches on either side. And as I'm standing there, I'm hanging onto my wife's hand and I'm turning and watching it go by. And I turned all the way around and watched it after it had passed. And it did the exact same thing on the other side. It did an immediate left-hand turn with the brakes squealing, went straight, not sideways skidding, into the fast lane, did a right-hand turn, and the next thing I know, the taillights go off and it just drives away. And I'm like, that's not possible. And I'm like hyper observant of all this stuff because things are like strange. And so I'm looking at the taillights driving away behind the camper facing Las Vegas. The road is absolutely pitch black. There's nothing there but that guy driving away, and way off in the distance, another pair of taillights of evidently another car that had passed us. So I turned back and I said, we need to get down off of this and get behind the wreck before some other bozo comes at us. So Carol gets down, I get down, the other guy gets down, and that's actually, I said again, we need to get around the side. So I led all of us around to the back of the camper. So the truck's here, the camper shell or the big camper's here, the trailer's here. We're literally blocking both lanes of Interstate 15, 8 miles outside of Las Vegas. Nobody's driving slow at 3 o'clock in the morning when this took place. So what stunned me, as we walk around to the back, I come around the corner of the camper and my jaw again drops. Look, my wife is ahead of me, but my mouth opens again in shock because that black empty road, sitting in that road right there, is now an ambulance with all its lights on and flashing. And I'm like, what? That's not possible. And the door opens and an EMT steps out and I said, where did you come from? And he said, I don't know. We have a cardiac patient inside who's suddenly stabilized. That's all he said to me. I turned to those two young guys. They're literally standing. One's like just next to my shoulder. The other one's practically touching his shoulder. The camper's behind us here. The truck's over here. And I just went. And I turned back. He grabs my wife's wrist to take her pulse. And I'm in shock. And I turn back. And there's nobody there except a police officer just rounding the corner. And I said, what happened to the two guys who were just standing here? He said, there's nobody here. I said, what? And I immediately ran all around the wreck, and there was nobody there. I'm like, okay. So the night finishes up. It took them till a little after 7 a.m., 4 hours, we completely blocked Interstate 15. About 4 hours later, the sun's up. The officer informed us that we literally flipped at 85 miles an hour. 85 miles an hour, rolled a whole truck and everything. And I'm noticing that there's an awful lot of policemen out there wandering around, and I'm thinking, oh man, we're going to jail or something. This is, but they kept walking by just a little bit further out than you are from me here. And they'd look at us, and they'd shake their head and walk away. And I kept seeing this, and I'm like, oh, man. So a young officer was going by, and I hailed. I said, "Hey, officer, can I talk to you for a second?" And he came over and he said, "Yeah, what's up?" I said, we really, obviously this was not planned. Nobody plans to crash or anything else. And I'm so sorry we've, created such a mess for people heading to Las Vegas and for you guys. But you guys keep walking by and looking at us and then walking away shaking your head." And he goes, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, wait a minute. You have to understand something. You see how many officers are out here?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "They came to see you." And I'm like, "Well, excuse me?" Most of these guys out here are 25-year veterans. And they have never seen an accident of this magnitude where two people step out of it without a scratch. As it turned out, my arm was a little strained and my wife had a couple of bruises on her arm. And so they were amazed. They came, they talked to us, they informed us of the speed and everything, and then they told us they were not going to give us a ticket. I was like, "Oh, thank you." I don't know why. I don't know what would have prompted them to not cite us for wrecking a car at 85 miles an hour in the middle of an interstate. And then later, an officer actually offered to drive us to a hotel, which he did, and they let us off. And so, to move forward real quickly, the next day we get up, we go to the wrecking yard to get stuff out of the truck and the camper that we can get. The car and the trailer are just completely totaled. The camper is totaled, but the truck, as it turned out, the insurance company said, "Oh, we can salvage it." It was dented and banged and scraped all the what. So I'm walking around the truck after we gathered stuff out and put it in the rental car. And I'm looking at the side of the passenger, and I can see my footprints on it was a king cab, on the back king cab door where I stood. And I can see my footprints on the glass where I stood on the door, and I can see my footprints and my wife's footprints on the door itself. But that young guy was standing on the fender, and there were no footprints there whatsoever. And I'm looking at that going, okay. And I'm trying to put it all together. Obviously, in my mind, I'm thinking two angels just pulled us out of a wreck. So we survived this heinous wreck. It was a shock. It was upsetting. My wife, first thing she said to me is, "I'm so sorry I wrecked your stuff." And I'm like, "You're alive. It's just stuff. Don't even give it a second thought. We can always replace stuff. I can't replace you." And so, I never ever said a word to her about the fact that we crashed. I mean, it happened. Could have happened to just about anybody, especially if you're tired and you don't know the rig. So that kind of is the end of that particular travail. So we got a ride. Her family came out actually and picked us up and drove us back to California. And we get back to Castaic RV park where we were living at the time. And we start telling people the story and everything else. And there was a gentleman, we called him Doc. He was actually the minister who married my wife and I. And we started to tell him what happened, and I mentioned, I wonder if this was because of that car. It was an older model Thunderbird, the big one, and the seats in it, in a properly working car, those seats go back and they have a latch that holds them there. Well, this car, for whatever reason, both latches were gone. Those seats would fly forward, and in my head, before we ever left, I thought, I don't know about this, because if they ever get in an accident, whoever's in these seats is not going to live. So we mentioned this to Doc and Bunny, his wife, and they said, "Oh, we had a bad feeling about that car." And we're like, "Excuse me? Why didn't you say something?" And then somebody else in the park told us, "Yeah, we had a bad feeling about that car." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, whatever." And so we're like, well, maybe there's a reason for it. So what happened is, this took place on May 4th of 2004. because her daughter didn't have a car and no way to get around, she actually came out and stayed with us for the summer. Got a job at McDonald's right there in Castaic, and she was their absolute favorite employee. She got letters of recommendation and rave reviews and everything else. And to, say reward her, we actually took her out. We bought a different car, a nice car, much better shape, everything else. And we then, all three of us, drove it back to Iowa to deliver it with her. So we did that, and then I got to back it up. What happened is before we ever got her that car, she went back towards the end of the summer, and she got a job right away. And so she was really excited because she got this job. And she was going to go with her girlfriends. There were going to be 5 of them. And she was usually the driver for anywhere they went. But the place called and said, up and up, we need you tomorrow. So she had to go get her uniform and other stuff that she needed for her job. And because she had to start the next day immediately and early in the morning, she said she couldn't go with her girlfriends. That evening, her girlfriends were in a head-on collision. Miracle of miracles, none of them died. They were injured. One girl broke both legs, and they had other injuries, but nobody was deathly injured or paralyzed or anything else. It was pretty much of a miracle. However, had Nikki owned the car we were originally going to give her with the seats that didn't lock, it's likely that they all would have died. And at that point, all of us, Doc and Bunny and my wife and I and other people, they all said, that's why the crash. The purpose of the crash was to save your daughter's life.
It was all related.
It was all related. It went down the line months and months and months. And then she came out. After that had happened, she came out. Then we got her in the car and we drove her back, and that was way towards the end of the summer. So it was pretty amazing.
Did you and your wife ever get away and have that vacation that you needed?
Well, we did a number of wonderful things and had good times, since then. But that really, that's kind of spoiled Nikki's birthday and our trip, if you will. But at the same time, it astounded me that had happened. And since then, I've had a number of unexplainable things happen. One that happened again in 2005. And this is short. We're living up here now in Northern California, and the snow's coming down, and we live up in Pioneer area. And my wife is off at work. I'm already home from work, but she's driving our two-wheel drive RAV, and I have the four-wheel drive truck. And I had this nagging thing. Something said, Go catch her before she comes down into the pines. Go catch her before she comes down into the pines, because the road's steep and it needs four-wheel drive. I finally went, oh, okay, I'll go. I wasn't hearing voices, but it was like this prompting kept happening. So I go and I almost make it up to Emmett Pines Station up there, and she had just rolled. I'm coming up, she rolls over the top onto the steep grade. No getting that car back up. So we stop, we trade cars. I put her in the four-wheel drive, so she turns around, and now I'm driving the RAV, and I have an idea how to get through. So, because I'd driven it, she hadn't. So I'm leading, and we drove, and we made it all the way up to Dewdrop Road and Shake Ridge. And the Shake Ridge Road right there, they'd repaved it not too long before, and there was about an inch lip transition. So I'm coming right up to it. I figure I'm just going to roll. I'm looking for cars. I figure I'm going to roll through. I turn my wheels and the car slides sideways in the middle of the road, blocking the road. Carol's there in the truck. And I'm like, not again. So I open my door and I put 1 foot out of the door onto the snow when I hear crunching behind me. I step out, I turn around and look over the car, and here's a tow truck. I'm like, wow, it's sure fortuitous that you showed up here at this time. He said, no, I got a call to come here. And I'm looking, there's no houses on that corner. There's no way anybody saw what just happened. And for him to get a call and be there the moment I step out of the car. So again, I believe that was the Lord. Just, he got our car, picked us up, and home.
A lot of times the circumstances don't allow um, for random events to happen, and all the things that you're talking about. There's a thread that weaves through everything that explains it all.
God, our Lord Jesus Christ, is real as real can be. And I don't have time in this to share many of the other things that happened before I actually knew the Lord. But he's been with me since before I was born. And I know that for a fact. And someday I'll share all of that. Thank you for taking your time to listen to this. God bless.
Good to hear.